The sand hits your face before you even open your eyes. It's not the soft kind. It's the kind that gets between your teeth, under your eyelids, inside every fold of skin you have. You are lying on a reed mat so thin you can feel the hardened earth beneath it, and the air around you already smells like sweat, animal dung, and something rotting in the heat, not far from where you sleep. The sun hasn't fully risen yet, and your body already hurts. This is the life of an ancient Egyptian slave, and everything you think you know about it is softer, cleaner, and more forgiving than what the evidence actually shows. Because when archaeologists began studying the skeletal remains, the tools, the administrative papyri, and the physical traces left behind by those who built the great monuments of the Nile, they found something the history books had consistently downplayed. The suffering wasn't incidental. It was structural. It was daily. And it started the moment you woke up. You have no concept of a slow morning. There is no easing into the day. In settlements near major construction zones, particularly around the plateau of Giza or the quarries of the Eastern Desert, workers were organized into gangs with names, hierarchies and schedules, tracked by scribes whose records have survived for thousands of years. You belong to one of these gangs. Your group has a name. Someone is counting how many times you showed up and how many times you didn't. Absence was noted. Reasons were sometimes recorded. Men skipped work because they were ill, because they were brewing beer, because they were bitten by scorpions. That last one was not rare. The desert floor around your sleeping area is exactly the kind of environment where scorpions, snakes, and biting beetles move freely at night, and your reed mat offers no real barrier. By the time the overseer's voice reaches your ears, your body is already cataloguing its damage from the night before. That blister on your heel from yesterday's march, the deep ache in your lower back that has become your permanent companion, the thing your right shoulder does now when you lift, that grinding sensation that wasn't there a year ago. This is what bioarchaeologists found when they examined the bones of workers buried in the cemetery discovered near the Giza Plateau in the 1990s. Not occasional injury. Systematic, cumulative destruction of the human body at a pace that modern medicine would classify as occupational trauma on an industrial scale. Your first task before the worksite is water. Not drinking water from a clean tap, water carried in ceramic vessels from the Nile or from wells, water that carries sediment, bacteria, parasites. Schistosomiasis, caused by a parasite found in Nile water, was so common in ancient Egypt that it shows up in mummy tissue analysis with striking regularity. You drink water that may be slowly rewiring your organs, and you have no way of knowing it. Breakfast, if it comes, is a dense bread made from emmer wheat, and if you have never cracked a tooth on ancient Egyptian bread, consider yourself protected from one of the most consistent findings in skeletal analysis of that period. The bread was milled using stone grinders, and microscopic grit from those stones ended up inside every loaf. Dental wear in ancient Egyptian working-class remains is so severe and so uniform that researchers treat it as a population-wide signature. Your teeth are not a cosmetic concern. They are eroding grain by grain, meal by meal, and by middle age, if you reach it, chewing will be painful enough to affect your nutrition. You eat the bread anyway. There is nothing else. The walk to the site is not short. Depending on the project and the season, you may be marching several kilometers before the real work begins, already thirsty in air that is dry enough to pull moisture from your lips before you notice it happening. The sun in Egypt is not a metaphor, it is a physical force, and by mid-morning it becomes something close to an adversary. You have a linen garment, probably a simple white kilt, and your skin is exposed. No sunscreen. No hat beyond perhaps a strip of linen wrapped around your head. Heat exhaustion was a real and present danger for workers on open construction sites with no shade structures, and the administrative records do show absences logged specifically for illness, the ancient Egyptian equivalent of someone going down on the job from dehydration or heat. You feel the sun on your shoulders and the back of your neck, and you understand, in a wordless way, that it is already winning. The work itself depends on the project. If you are at a quarry, your job may involve pounding dolerite balls against limestone or granite faces to extract blocks, a process that sends vibrations up your arms and into your joints for hours without pause. Dolerite pounders have been found at ancient quarry sites, worn down to smoothness from use. The sound is relentless. The dust is relentless. Silica dust from stone cutting, when inhaled consistently over years, causes a progressive lung condition that modern medicine now treats as a serious occupational disease. Ancient Egyptian workers had no such luxury. If your lungs were slowly filling with fine stone particles, you coughed more than the others, and you kept working. If you are hauling stone rather than cutting it, your body is being used as a crane. Estimates based on the size of the blocks, the slope of the ramps, and the number of workers depicted in ancient illustrations suggest that a single large limestone block required dozens of men pulling in coordinated effort with ropes and wooden sledges over wet sand or mud used as a lubricant. You are one of those men. The rope cuts into your palms. The sand burns through your sandals. The overseer's pace is not set by your comfort. Injury was managed, and this is one of the more striking revelations from the Giza workers' cemetery. The bones show healed fractures, meaning that workers who broke limbs were sometimes given enough time to partially recover before returning to labor. Archaeologists found evidence of basic medical intervention, crude but real. Ancient Egyptian medical papyri, particularly the Edwin Smith papyrus, which is one of the oldest surgical texts ever discovered, describe treatments for fractures, dislocations and wounds with a clinical accuracy that suggests hands-on experience with exactly the kind of trauma that construction work produces. Someone set broken bones. Someone dressed infected cuts with honey, which does have genuine antimicrobial properties. But the healed fractures in those bones also show that workers returned to hard labor before full recovery, because the work did not wait. Your body was an asset with a maintenance budget, not a person with a right to rest. Midday arrives with no relief. There is no air conditioning, no refrigerated drink, no shade structure with a fan. If rations were distributed at a midday break, and the records suggest they sometimes were, it may have been more bread, dried or salted fish, onions and water. The caloric math of hard physical labor in extreme heat means your body is in a constant state of debt. You need more than you are getting. The result is fatigue that accumulates like debt, compounding across days and weeks and months into a kind of baseline exhaustion that becomes your new normal. You stop remembering what it felt like not to be tired. Think about the last time you sat down at a clean table and ate a full meal in a cool room and then stood up, feeling genuinely restored. That experience did not exist here. It was not a luxury that was rare. It was a concept that had no frame of reference in your life. The social reality of your situation carried its own separate weight. Egyptian slavery was not a monolithic institution identical to the later Atlantic slave trade, but the people at the bottom of the labor pyramid, whether conscripted peasants, war captives or debt laborers, had almost no meaningful autonomy over their time, their movement or their bodies. Your name was in a list, your output was tracked, your rations were conditional on your performance. The overseers were not abstract authorities. They were physically present, and the administrative tone in the surviving documents suggests enforcement was direct. You did not negotiate the terms of your labor. You showed up, you performed, and you hoped that the calculation made by whoever owned your days would keep you alive long enough to be useful again tomorrow. By late afternoon, your hands have the texture of bark. The calluses on your feet have cracked, and some of those cracks have not closed properly. In the Egyptian climate, any open wound on the foot or leg that comes into regular contact with dust, dung-contaminated soil, and standing water from the flood season is an infection risk with no easy resolution. Gangrene was real. Sepsis was real. And the line between a minor cut and a fatal infection was determined by luck and by the basic immune status of a body already operating under chronic nutritional stress. You wrap the foot in linen if you have it. You keep moving. The return at day's end brings you back to the settlement. The smell hits before the sight does, because a concentrated population of men performing hard physical labor without access to bathing, without sewage infrastructure, without deodorant, without clean linen changes, produces an olfactory reality that has no equivalent in modern life. The smell of that camp, that settlement, that village at the end of a working day was an accumulation of days and weeks and months of human bodies in conditions of complete sensory rawness. You eat again. Bread, maybe something boiled, maybe a small piece of meat if the records show a feast day, which did happen with documented regularity because the Egyptian state understood that starving workers were inefficient workers. Beer was part of the ration, thick and nutritious by the standards of the time, slightly fermented and lower in alcohol than modern equivalents, but real and regular. You drink it because the water is worse. Your body is a closed system running on minimum inputs at maximum expenditure. You lie back on the mat as the temperature finally drops and the desert sky fills with stars that you do not have the energy to look at. The stars over ancient Egypt were extraordinary, undimmed by any artificial light, a canopy of absolute clarity that poets and priests described with reverence. You are too exhausted to care. Your shoulder grinds when you shift position. The blister on your heel has reopened. Somewhere in your abdomen, the parasite you ingested months ago in the water is doing something your body cannot name. You are 26 years old. The skeletal data from the Giza cemetery suggests that working-class Egyptians showed significant joint degeneration by their 30s, and the average age of death in that population was considerably lower than the elite burials just a few hundred meters away. The pyramids you helped build will stand for 4,500 years. Your name will not survive the decade. This is the reality that the sand preserved and the stones refused to say out loud. Behind every photograph of a golden sarcophagus, every documentary about the brilliance of ancient engineering, every travel magazine spread about the timeless beauty of the Nile, there was a population of human beings whose days looked exactly like this one. Not myth, not mystery. Bodies, ropes, bread, heat and pain, documented in bone and papyrus, and the silence of a mass cemetery that no one built monuments over. The next time you turn on a faucet and get clean water without thinking about it, you are living in a distance from this reality so vast it would be almost impossible to explain to the person lying on that mat. And if you could step into that single day, just one day, without any preparation, without any modern immunity, without any of the invisible privileges your ordinary life provides, you would not last until the stars came out. If there is a civilization, an empire, a ritual, a court, or a period of history you want to see stripped of its mythology and reconstructed in its real physical weight, let us know in the comments. The beautiful version of history is everywhere. The true version is harder to find, and that is exactly why it matters.